you're focusing on the responsibility.
Just a moment, because
Okay, it's a
I
dialogue.
don't know. I cannot disagree with your argument, but I want to stress that there's difficulties, there are differences in the south. Take, for example, forget Greece, Sicily, take Sicily. In Sicily, why Sicily is different from the north of Italy? Sicily is different because the social situation or the way the state functioned in Sicily was not the same the state functioned in northern Italy. There is a difference between them, and this is the same in Greece. There was always a clientele system. I must explain why things are different. Greece was created in 1821. When it was created, there was no state before, and there was no organized society. The state created the organized society. In Western Europe, in Sweden, organized society existed since the 17th or the 15th century. In Italy, since the 14th century. So there's a backlog. And this, you can't see it, but still there are differences that exist. That's why I must stress we want in Greece, and I think the South needs the European Union in order to overcome these differences, in order to see how they can organize better their societies.
You're mentioning...
But this is a problem. There are different societies.
You're mentioning different societies from south of Europe, but it's not, I was saying a few moments ago, it's not only the problem of south of Europe, Greece, Cyprus, Spain, etc. Take France, for example. The state in France exists much longer than in Greece, for example, and still everyone admit that France has serious problem of competitiveness, right? So it's...
Well, I still think that you have a choice, shot at being Swedes if you try really hard. Being a little more serious, I go back to what I said. We are not slaves of history. We are masters of our own destinies. We, our peoples, our societies. We are responsible for the choices that we make, and we can make choices. All societies can make choices. We are responsible for them. There is no such thing as them in the government. It's our government, right? We elected those guys. It's our responsibility. I happen to think that whatever happened in your own particular example, La République Française, France will be forced to adjust in one way or another. Societies don't do unsustainable things forever, by definition. If it's unsustainable one day, it will no longer be sustained. One day, France, like Germany, incidentally, in the beginning of the 2000s, which was a very uncompetitive economy, by the way. One day, regardless of the stripe of the government that is in power in the Élysée, structural reforms will be introduced and implemented in France. And perhaps when this comes, we'll be talking about the miracle of Southern Europe, and then all those northerns will try to emulate the very flexible labor markets and structural reforms that we implement. We don't know. History is not a given. History is what we make out of it.
But we have...
Just a moment, because I don't agree with your expression. We are not slaves of our system.
I said we're not slaves of history.
Slaves of history. In any case, in the previous discussion, I don't remember who said that the Tunisian people was not mature enough. What does that mean? Why the Islamists are not mature and the others are mature? I don't agree to put the problems in this way, because when you read about competitivity, apart the investment and so on, there is one other prerequisite, and this is education. And they say, the more higher education you have, the more competitive you are. The less higher education, the less competitive you are. So the European Commission said, one of our aim will be, if I remember, 40% of those who go to school should go also to university. If you have a country where people are not educated as much as in Germany or in Great Britain or in Sweden and so on, are there not, in a sense, I would not say slaves to their history, but no, they are not slaves, but in any case, they have to bear the history they had. The people in Tunisia is not mature because there was a history there. They will not become mature from one day to another. This is not an expression I said, I heard it, and that's why I mention it. So,
but excuse me, Mr. Simitis, aren't you a bit responsible for this situation? You've been
of course.
Prime Minister of your country during 8 years, during 96 to 2004. I was in Greece in 2004, by the way, for the Olympics. Everything looked terrific in Greece. There was growth. The Olympics were going to give prosperity for another 10 years. And everyone had forgot that there was, you know, public spending had become so unreasonable in your country that, you know, it's the responsibility of the politics.
It's responsible of the politics. I'm quite, I agree with it. But because you mentioned my period as a Prime Minister, I want to remind us that during my period of a Prime Minister, during the 8 years, there was a middle average of growth of 3.6%. And Greece never had, up to 1996, for 8 years, such an average. I want to remind that the deficit was for nearly from 2000 to 2004 under 3%. And when, this is a long story and I don't want to go in this story, they said that Greece did not have this deficit it should have when it became member of the European Union. The deficit was 3.01, that's 3.01, and France had a deficit of 3.5. Portugal had a deficit of 3.3. Italy, a deficit of 3.2.
The figures were wrong. We all know that now, that the figures were wrong.
But they're only saying the figures of Greece were wrong. But not the figures of Greece were only wrong, the figures also of the other countries were wrong, and this is not mentioned. And I repeat, the figures of Greece were wrong because there was, you put a question, that's a long story. There was a different way of accounting the military expenses, and the European Union in 2006 changed the decisions of 2004 that presented that the statistics were wrong. But we should leave this story.
And Moody's didn't say anything, and Standard & Poor's didn't say anything about that.
I didn't work at Moody in those days. That's the explanation.
But now, this is not the problem nowadays. But you mentioned my government, that I wanted to say you that it's not my government that created this situation. This situation was created after 2004, in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, and so on. So there are also differences in policies in every country, and I think we should know that there can be a change to good or bad, even by single government. In Germany now, everybody is speaking about the Hartz measures of Gerhard Schröder, and they think now that Germany is the first European country in competitivity because of Gerhard Schröder. Isn't it so? Yes, it was only Schröder 2 years, 3 years who made the change. So we must not look before 30 years or 40 years as far as deficits are concerned. We must look at those who created the deficits.
Okay. Before taking a few questions, I'd like to ask you one last question to both of you. Very simple question. Do you know where we're going?
In general terms, I think I do. I will put again my chief economist of Moody's hat. Even with the current stresses, and at least until reality proves us wrong, our scenario is of a survival of the euro area in its current form, more or less in its current form.
More or less means what? It's
jokes apart, this is the central of the distribution. Of course, you always have tails in terms of what might happen or not. What we expect in terms of this central scenario is the survival of the euro area,
and in terms of
broadly
growth,
speaking, in its current form, a significant deepening of the integration processes of the EU, because it's also part of our analysis that one of the underlying causes of the crisis was this absence of coordination frameworks and of structures like banking union. We had a very imperfect economic union, and this is, in a very typical European Union way, being progressively and slowly resolved. So our central scenario is that. In any case, and just piggybacking on the analysis that I did of the crisis in the periphery, inevitably what lies ahead of us are several years of disappointing low growth. This remains a fundamental fragility, not only of the euro area, but of the European Union. One small anecdote. Do you realize that while France has lost market share because of China, India, the United Kingdom, presumably with a much more flexible labor market and with a floating exchange rate, actually lost twice as much global market share than France? This is a problem that we have not only of the euro area, but of the European Union as a whole. We have countries which have many structural rigidities and have very low long-term growth. This remains a challenge which we, for the good of our societies, we really have to address.
Where are we going?
I agree. And I want to explain also something now. Now you have the crisis in Cyprus and in the other countries, and all of us know that there are elections in Germany in September, and so the European Union is at this moment has not the possibility to take decisions, important decisions, because the Germans, I say rightly, say we cannot take decisions now. So I think that after September, when Germany will have a new government, then the discussion about the future of the Union will begin again, and they will try to have a better structure, to create these economic governments, to proceed with the banking union, so to, shall I say, repair or make better the whole of system. And that's why I also think that things will get better in after 2013, 2014, 2015. The European Union will function in a better way, and then we must see also that the Union is something that cannot go back and be dismantled. This is a creation that is there and will exist and will always function better. It's the creation of a modern state, of a new state, a modern state, of a state that is of another type than the national states we know. This takes time and this is difficult, but they have to achieve it because, as you mentioned, there is the competition of China, there is the competition of India. If they do not do it, then they will lose ground.
Do you think it's a question of
So I'm an optimistic in the long sense, but perhaps I'm pessimistic now.
But for you, it's...
If I can make a comment, we Moody's are realists all the time, in the short and in the long term.
So it's, for you, it's much more a question of institution, how they function, rather than economic policy, the economic policy we're going to sustain. You were mentioning, you know, functioning of the European Union, etc., the institution.
The functioning of the European Union is concerning also the economic policy they are applying, because now the principle the principle that is applying to the European Union is that there cannot be transfer of money from one state to the other. So this is a principle that theoretically will not be changed. But there are different proposals that have been made in order to find a better balance between the center and the periphery. For example, in the Financial Times, Martin Wolf had made a proposal that there should be an insurance union in the European Union, an insurance union. That means that every state has to pay in an organization a certain sum of money every year according to its income, so that this organization works as an insurer, private insurer for all the states. And then there has also to be a policy when, for example, there is a crisis in the south, there should be a more lenient monetary policy or economic policy in the north, 3% inflation, we say, so that the south could export more goods to the north, and this could be balanced. This is not a Greek proposition, this is from Martin Wolf of the Financial Times. So,
and you're confident that the Germans are going to accept it, even after the elections?
The Germans said they will never accept it, but they have said it many times, so perhaps they will accept it. But we have to find solution. That's the thing we should know.
Okay. Thank you very much, both of you. Si there's questions, des questions, allez-y. Ici. Micro. Micro.
My name is Max Johnson. I'm an energy project developer working in West Africa, but also in Europe. I also live in Sweden. So I just make some comments on the Swedish adjustments, and then I'll actually ask a question in that context. So in the 90s crisis in Sweden, there were a lot of differences. The rest of the world was doing quite well. We had a floating currency, which was more than floating, which we actually devalued ourselves. Okay, so instead of going through the pain that the PIGS countries, sorry the term, are going through with internal devaluations, we devalued our currency, we kept people working. The other thing we did in Sweden is that when we resolved the banking crisis, we allowed the bank to realize a lot of their collateral at very low valuations, and those assets quickly became worth a lot more. Okay, so that helped the government turn around the banking sector without too much damage to the public balance sheet. What it did do, though, it damaged the households' balance sheets. And we should know that in Sweden, the households are among the most indebted in all of OECD. And in terms of household wealth, if you look at the median wealth of Italy, for example, compared to Germany, a lot of these southern European countries' households are actually a lot richer than the northern Europeans. So in a sense, this fantastic adjustment was in different contexts, using different tools and with different sacrifices of the people. So here's the question.
So you were a slave of history, or you were a slave of the common currency too?
Swedish people are brought up to be slaves to the state. You know, it's a socialist country. So it's also, that also makes it easier culturally, actually, a joke aside. But the question here it is, should Europe really stick so much to keeping the euro? Because let's face it, the PIGS countries have an overvalued currency, which kills their industry, cannot be competitive, and Northern Europe has an undervalued currency, which can have other problems. So that's the question.
Allow me to start by saying that I do take personally the PIGS thing. Now, two remarks on what you said on the Swedish adjustment first. It's obviously important that the external environment was more accommodating than what we have now, growth-wise. It's a classical situation that small open economies, they can adjust and return to growth via net exports. That's exactly what's happening, for instance, in Portugal and Ireland, and this is exactly what happened in Sweden too. I am not a big fan of nominal devaluations, for the very simple reason that I think that this is a way for a country to avoid what really makes you competitive in the long term, which is a structural adjustment. At the most, nominal devaluations, they buy you a little time. And in some cases can be really a very little time if you have, for instance, a really very open economy. This sort of a nominal devaluation is very fast, feeds into inflation, and then you have all the sorts of problems that you have to deal with. I don't buy the notion that just the existence of the nominal adjustment instrument of the exchange rate takes you out of the hook. You still need the structural reform. All that the floating currencies do is to buy you a little more time. On the notion of the value of the common currency, one of the things that I, as an economist, I always try to do is to try to see things via cost-benefit analysis. I don't buy the notion that my government or my country should be involved on anything just because we have a strong commitment to be good Europeans. We don't, right? We are on this because in the end of the day, the cost-benefit analysis tells us that we are better with it than without it. It doesn't need to be perfect. In economics, all that is necessary is that you have to have a small marginal difference that makes A better than B. I usually give this example of my old poor student days when I was doing my PhD in the Netherlands. We still didn't have the common currency in those days, and I was shuttling between Rotterdam and Brussels because I had a position as a research assistant in the University of Brussels. And I had to keep two different currencies on my pockets. I would put the Belgian francs on the right one and the Dutch florins on the other. That's a graphical example of what is called in economics a deadweight loss. When you eliminate the exchange rate veil between two highly integrated economic areas, by definition you have a efficiency gain for your economy. Again, I don't buy the notion that we are on this just because we are good Europeans. We are on this because the existence of the euro delivers clear, positive, beneficial results to our economies. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. The real problem with the euro is a design of the flaw, not of the idea itself, that we benefit from it. Is the structure of the euro was badly designed from the beginning, and in a way we're actually lucky that the sort of a external crisis didn't hit us before. It's not a problem with the euro area, it's a problem with the design of the euro area. This is a very important distinction.
Can you elaborate just on that, on the design of the euro?
Oh, quite simple. We started a monetary union not only without the existence of common fiscal tools, but we didn't even have a banking union, which is absolutely remarkable when you start thinking about this. At the same time in which we liberalized to a significant degree, the retail side of our financial systems. From a retail side, they became highly integrated. There was no common supervisory authority. There was no common resolution authority. As to this day, it still doesn't exist. We have now a process of implementation of a common supervisory authority in the hands of the ECB, but we stayed for 10 years in a monetary union without a common supervisory financial agency. That's really remarkable.
So the Eurogroup should become a real instrument in maybe a government of the euro?
Let's not prejudge what is going to be the structure that will have this more centralized fashion. It could be, for instance, an enhanced DG ECOFIN, the Minister of Economy and Finance of the Union. What we expect and what we have been observing is this slow process of enhancing of this more centralized, more coordinated economic governance of the euro area, at least of the euro area.
Okay. Mr. Simitis.
I agree with what I said. I want just make a remark on what you said, the cost-benefit analysis. Naturally, if there is not a benefit, it would not have been done. But we should not take only, because there is also a benefit that is not, that cannot be exactly counted. It's not a benefit, an economic benefit. It's also a moral benefit, I would say, a benefit that has more to do with the type of society that we can
symbolical
develop,
benefits.
Symbolical than a pure economic benefit. And the European Union has also this side. There is a benefit that cannot be exactly counted, found out what this is. But when people work together, they can achieve much more.
That's an economic concept that is perfectly quantifiable.
Stefan Wagstall from the Financial Times.
Of course, we were working together, so we become more productive, right? So that's an economic concept.
I'm Stefan Wagstall. I write about emerging markets at the Financial Times. In the 1 week of the Cypriot crisis in its latest incarnation, China has added to the world economy the equivalent of a Cyprus. The other emerging markets have between them added the equivalent of a Cyprus. This session, among other things, is billed as focusing on competitiveness, which I understand to be the competitiveness of Europe. What is it that we're going to do to both compete with and collaborate with these enormous challenges?
If you allow me, I will start, and perhaps Prime Minister Simitis would like to complete. I have a peculiar professional career. Actually, I was headhunted for my current job while I was in the World Bank in Washington, which provided me, from the point of view of a provincial European, exactly this notion that there is something called the global economy, and boy, it is very big, right? And much bigger than us. Developing countries have actually been responsible for over 50% of global growth for close to 15 years now. So China is not exactly a surprise, right? It's an economic reality in developing countries in general that has been there for several years. They present challenges not only to us, Europeans, but to developed countries in general. The way that not only Europe, but developed countries in general can remain competitive is by concentrating investments in high value-added sectors. We are never going to be as competitive as Vietnam in terms of the production of shoes or belts. Simply ain't going to work like that. No matter how much the British government decides to devalue the pound, you are never going to be doing shoes as cheap as the Vietnamese. So it doesn't go this way anymore. The only opportunity that we have in terms of maintaining our relative economic prosperity is to concentrate our economies on higher value-added sectors, both in terms of manufacturing and in terms of services. That's the real future that we have, in broad terms, for all developed economies, not only the euro area, not only the European Union, but all the way from the United States to Japan.
Mr. Simitis, on this question, how are you going to compete with...
May I just...
if you want to conclude, there's another question over there.
Ok. Bonsoir tout le monde. Ila Jinan, consultant chez Capital Consulting. D'abord, un petit remerciement, une taquinerie à mes amis de l'Institut Amadeus et une question. Les remerciements pour votre panel et pour leur excellente présentation. La taquinerie, c'est que j'aurais préféré que la conférence s'appelle Half Growth Conference, parce qu'on n'a pas vu une seule femme sur les panels de cet après-midi. Donc on ne peut pas avoir une Global Growth. Et la question concerne ce qui s'est passé à Chypre et plus globalement ce qui pourrait se passer dans les pays d'Europe du Sud. Est-ce qu'on peut considérer les 10% d'imposition de l'épargne bancaire comme une dévaluation de fait de l'euro chypriote? Et est-ce qu'on peut imaginer qu'il puisse y avoir demain 2 euros, 1 euro en première classe et 1 euro de deuxième classe dévalué?
Non. Non, je ne crois pas. Il pourrait avoir 2 euros, 1 euro de Chypre, 1 euro de Grèce et 1 euro d'Allemagne qui serait 3 fois plus que l'euro existant. Il y a 1 euro et l'euro, naturellement, a une valeur différente à cause de différentes inflations dans certains pays, mais c'est le même euro. Si vous avez 1 euro en Chypre et vous achetez quelque chose, vous achetez peut-être la même chose en Allemagne avec le même euro, n'est-ce pas?
Just complementing the reply, I cannot really foresee a structure for a common currency in which you have different valued currencies within it. If you allow me to make one remark in something that you said, the possible consequences of Cyprus to quote-unquote peripheral Europe, one thing that is remarkable notable since we started with the Cypriot question is the very limited amount of quote-unquote contagion that we have observed out of Cyprus to the other peripheral European countries. I'm not going to speculate on the reasons for that, but we seem not to be observing the degree of pass-through and contagion that we observed, for instance, during last summer, when we had effectively what probably were much more serious stresses in terms of the euro area. That's something that when we look at the current situation is something not worthy for us to think about.
Okay, if there's no more questions, peut-être une dernière remarque de Monsieur Simitis. Vous vouliez conclure?
Just wanted to say, because there was a small question, how we will compete in Europe with China and India and the others. And then if I can read 2 or 3 sentences out of a paper of the European Union, the Commission in 2010 prepared a paper called Europe 2020, and it analyzed what is to be done in order that the European Union leads economic development in the world. So they said, Innovation Union, to improve framework conditions and access to finance for research and innovation so as to ensure that innovative ideas can be turned into products and services that create growth and jobs. So innovation is most important. Then a digital agenda for Europe to speed up the roll out of high-speed internet and reap the benefits of a digital single market for households and firms. That means new technologies, resource-efficient Europe to support the shift towards a low-carbon economy, increase the use of renewable energy sources, modernize our transport sector, and promote energy efficiency. And then an industrial policy for the globalization era to improve the business environment and to support the development and of a strong and sustainable industrial base able to compete globally. All this means that the niveau, I would say, of the European Union products, industry, efforts must be the best of the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Simitis. Thank you, Mr. Vinhas de Souza. Merci à vous tous. Et ceci conclut la première journée de cette conférence. Bonne soirée. À plus tard. Il y a un social event ce soir et à demain.